Roy Baumeister and John Tierney's Willpower, Rediscovering the Greatest Human Strength is a blend of psychological research, practical advice, and engaging storytelling that explores the nature of self-control and how it shapes our lives. The book argues that willpower, more than intelligence or talent, is the critical force behind success in almost every area of life. By weaving scientific studies with vivid examples, the authors show how willpower functions like a muscle. It can be depleted by overuse but also strengthened with practice. At the core of their argument is the idea of ego depletion, the theory that willpower draws from a limited reservoir of mental energy. The authors illustrate this through experiments showing that people who exert self-control in one task, such as resisting cookies, tend to perform worse on unrelated tasks requiring discipline afterward. This depletion explains why people often make poor choices late in the day or when they've been juggling too many decisions. The insight helps frame everyday struggles. A blown diet in the evening isn't necessarily weakness of character, but a sign that the willpower reserve has been drained. Baumeister and Tierney also connect willpower to glucose, noting that the brain runs on energy, and decision fatigue has a physiological basis. Judges, for instance, were found to grant parole more often after meal breaks than before, suggesting that hunger reduced their mental stamina. This makes the point that maintaining self-control isn't just about mental grit but also about managing one's body. Small interventions, like a snack, can improve decision-making. The connection between biology and behavior underscores the book's theme. Willpower is embodied, practical, and tied to everyday habits. The authors argue that modern life taxes willpower more than in the past because of the sheer number of choices we must make daily. Every decision, from what to wear to how to respond to an email, depletes the same reserve. They call this decision fatigue and show how it affects everyone from CEOs to shoppers. By reducing trivial decisions, people can conserve energy for more meaningful choices. This principle is embodied in stories like Barack Obama's claim that he wore only gray or blue suits to minimize unnecessary decisions, a real-world strategy for preserving self-control. Another key theme is the paradox of freedom. While the modern era offers unparalleled choice, it also burdens us with constant decision-making, which erodes willpower. Baumeister and Tierney suggest that structure, rules, and routines can actually enhance freedom by conserving mental energy. When you don't have to decide repeatedly whether to exercise, study, or save money. Because it's a fixed part of your routine, you're freer to use willpower for higher pursuits. Structure doesn't restrict, it liberates. The book emphasizes that self-control is not about iron discipline alone but about smart planning. One of the most effective strategies is what psychologists call pre-commitment, where people set up situations that make it harder to stray from their goals. Ulysses tying himself to the mast to resist the sirens becomes a metaphor for creating barriers against temptation. In modern terms, this might mean using savings accounts with withdrawal penalties, keeping junk food out of the house, or setting public deadlines. These strategies turn willpower from a constant battle into a system of smart safeguards. The authors stress that willpower is deeply connected to long-term goals and identity. People who succeed in exerting self-control often do so not by fighting temptation moment to moment but by aligning their actions with a larger sense of who they are and what they value. Someone who sees themselves as a healthy person, for instance, finds it easier to avoid unhealthy food. By anchoring choices to identity, willpower becomes less about resisting in the moment and more about living consistently with a story you tell yourself. They also point out the dangers of unrealistic expectations. Many people assume that a single act of willpower, say, deciding to diet, will transform their lives, only to give up when change proves harder than expected. Real progress, the authors argue, comes from building self-control gradually, treating it like a muscle that grows with training. Small wins accumulate into larger capacities. A person who starts by simply keeping their desk tidy may, over time, find it easier to tackle more daunting challenges. Throughout the book, Baumeister and Tierney use history and biography to bring their points to life. They describe how figures like Benjamin Franklin and modern entrepreneurs built habits of discipline that underpin their success. Franklin's methodical approach to cultivating virtues, for instance, illustrates how systematic self-improvement strengthens willpower. These stories serve as both inspiration and evidence that discipline, far from being dull, is the foundation of achievement and creativity. The book also highlights how willpower influences relationships. Couples who manage conflict well often rely on restraint rather than venting every emotion, while parents who model self-control foster it in their children. The ability to delay gratification, manage impulses, and think about long-term consequences is at the heart of not just personal success but also healthy families and communities. Self-control builds trust and stability, making it a social as well as individual strength. At the same time, the authors caution against overusing willpower. Just as a muscle can be exhausted, willpower can burn out when overextended. This helps explain why people relapse after periods of intense control, like dieters binging after strict restriction. The lesson is not to avoid discipline but to manage it wisely, combining willpower with forgiveness and realistic pacing. A sustainable path balances restraint with renewal, rules with flexibility. Technology and consumer culture present unique challenges to willpower, with constant temptations designed to exploit our impulses. The authors explore how social media, advertising, and instant gratification wear down resistance. Yet they also suggest that these environments make cultivating willpower even more essential. In a world of distractions, the ability to focus, delay gratification, and stay consistent becomes an increasingly rare and valuable skill. Financial habits provide another concrete arena where willpower plays out. People who can resist spending in the moment build long-term security, while those who fall prey to impulses often end up trapped in debt. The authors highlight research showing that the ability to delay gratification in childhood predicts adult success in income, health, and relationships. This long arc of consequences demonstrates how willpower compounds over a lifetime, shaping destinies in ways intelligence or charm cannot. The book ultimately positions willpower as the invisible force that underlies freedom, success, and happiness. Without self-control, people become slaves to impulses and external pressures. With it, they can chart their own course. Baumeister and Tierney argue that the greatest achievements of civilization, from art to science to democracy, are possible only because of humanity's capacity to regulate itself. Willpower is not a minor trait but the foundation of progress. By the end, the authors encourage readers to see willpower not as a grim struggle but as a source of empowerment. Developing it requires awareness, structure, and gradual practice, but the payoff is enormous: greater health, wealth, stability, and fulfillment. The book leaves readers with a sense that the true strength of humanity lies not in our intelligence alone but in our capacity to harness and direct our impulses. Willpower, far from being a constraint, is the very thing that allows us to live fully and freely.